Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Forbes senior contributor, Mark Joyella. Mark, thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. Good to be here.
One of our last conversations was almost 3 months ago at this point, and that's when Chris Licht was ousted as the leader of CNN. Well, now the network announced a new chairman and chief executive. Give us a sense of who's Mark Thompson.
Well, this is I think, a serious person, a person with deep business experience, newsroom experience. He led the BBC, and then he famously led the New York Times through a really significant transformation of that newsroom from kind of being a legacy newspaper brand into being a digital first brand. And he had originally set a goal. He said, look, we want 10 million paid subscribers to the New York Times Digital. He did it, even though folks were doubtful at first. And today, 9 out of 10 of those subscribers, they don't get a physical newspaper. It's all digital. And that represents, perhaps for the business side of Warner Brothers Discovery, CNN's parent, suggests this is a person who can maybe turn around at least the business part and put CNN on the right footing for the future.
Let's talk about where CNN is, because when Chris Licht took over, there was a lot of changes. The ratings were in the gutter. Where is CNN now? Is that still the case?
CNN continues to struggle in the ratings. As recently as March, primetime ratings were down 60% compared to the year before. Some of that can be credited to a change in the news cycle, but the ratings have not rebounded. And just last month in August, if you look at the highest rated shows in cable news, Fox News has, among the top half of the top 10. MSNBC has got a few shows in there, including Rachel Maddow, who delivered 3 million viewers, the highest rated show in cable news in August. CNN's highest rated show was in 26th place overall. And that suggests how much of a pit they have to climb out of in terms of the ratings.
Let's compare and contrast a little bit Mark Thompson to Chris Licht. Chris Licht was in all of the headlines really over the summer because of that Atlantic profile, because of him losing support in the newsroom. What do you think his leadership style would be like compared to that of Mark Thompson?
Well, let's take a look at what Mark Thompson told to CNN with his memo on being appointed to the job. One of the things he said was, it won't be me that sets course for CNN, it will be us, implying that we're going to figure it out together and that it would be clear to everyone in the building what that vision looks like. I think that was one of the things that Chris Licht struggled with. People didn't know exactly where they were headed and what he was doing. Thompson also said that when he arrives in the building, and he said he would be coming by, dropping in over the next few weeks, he officially starts in October. He said, I will be doing a lot more listening than speaking. And it's hard not to read that as a kind of direct comparison to Licht, who in that Atlantic profile was famously out of sight and did not listen. People felt they didn't have a real sense of who this guy was. So from that alone, we get a sense of a different leadership style. And I think many CNNers, it's been a rough year or more for them. A lot of turmoil, a lot of turnover, the ratings problems, obviously, programming changes. And I don't know that people are going to automatically feel like, hey, this is good, we're fixed now. But I think that they are saying, okay, let's see what happens. Maybe this will be better.
The we versus us, the listening versus speaking, I mean, that goes against what we talked about when we talked about Chris Licht. I watched our conversation recently while preparing for this current conversation, and you said Chris Licht had such a tin ear that would be studied in business classes to come. So this does sound like the complete polar opposite. But as we know, one of Licht's lasting remarks on the on CNN was rebranding the morning show. That morning show now is doing worse than CNN New Day, the previous one. We also know his first course of action was completely slashing CNN Plus. Do we have the sense that Mark Thompson will come in here and immediately make these enormous changes, or will come in, maybe read the room and do smaller incremental changes during his tenure?
Yeah, it's hard to know as far as the big decisions of, where are we going to go? What's going to happen in prime time? What's going to happen in the morning? But at least style wise, he did send a clear message. I will listen to you. He also took time in his memo to talk about what he saw as the strongest thing that CNN has as far as turning things around and building a ship that will survive into the future. And that was the brand itself and the journalism that CNN does. And he specifically talked about having spent an entire day watching CNN during the Wagner crisis that was unfolding in Russia as the mercenary troops appeared to be rolling toward Moscow. He said he found it gripping. He said it was an example of great journalism, and that has got to be something that people in the building will hear and say, okay, that's good. Because real journalism has always been the thing that CNN said, this is what we are. This is what we are about. So that's important. The business side probably at first may appeal more to David Zaslav, the CEO of the parent company, Warner Brothers Discovery, because they want to see the money side of it, of course. Losing ratings means losing revenue. That has to be turned around quickly. And Thompson has the experience of having transformed newsrooms. So not sure how fast that'll happen, but certainly that's what he's going to be tasked with doing.
That's really interesting that you say that his first note to staff, he was congratulating them on their coverage, because as we know, once again, from that fateful Atlantic piece, Chris Licht really bemoaned the COVID coverage of CNN. And I do want to talk about something that you said, a ship to survive in the future, steering that ship as a news network. How do you do that this day and age?
Well, the thing is that CNN has a lot of challenges, ratings challenges. Fox News and MSNBC are doing better in the ratings, but they're all facing this sort of generational changes that are affecting broadcast journalism in general. The fact that, hey, young people don't think of turning on cable news. They just don't do it. There's streaming, there's cord cutting, and that affects everybody's business. It's a fact of, you have to figure out how you are going to adapt to survive. Thompson did that with the New York Times. With CNN, it's going to be, you mentioned CNN Plus. That was supposed to be the future, streaming. It was killed off because, you think about Mark Thompson talking about getting 10 million paid subscribers to the New York Times. The goal was over 1 million or so for CNN Plus in its first year. When they pulled the plug, they had 10,000 viewers. It didn't suggest, at least to the new owners of CNN, that that was going to work. Can he find a way to bring the brand into streaming in a way that will be relevant to the future viewers who are either going to watch CNN or they're not? And he seems like the kind of guy who would be able to come up with an idea. And he said, he specifically said in his email, and forgive me if I don't have the exact quote right, but he said something like, these challenges, I see them as opportunities. And again, that probably sounds to people inside CNN like, okay, so, it's going to be okay. Maybe not that bleak, but he does have a confident way of speaking, a humble way of speaking. And he recognizes that, you can't just keep doing what you're doing because you're not going to survive.
His note to staff definitely had an optimistic tone to this, and CNN's senior media reporter Oliver Darcy really touched on what we're talking about right now when he was reporting on the news. He wrote this: CNN faces an existential threat to its business model due to the rapid contraction of traditional linear television, where it generates the bulk of its revenue. Do you think Mark Thompson is prepared for this job, is the right leader for this moment?
Well, I would say, having not spoken to him, judging by the fact that he took the job, he clearly must think, I can do this. He has a track record of doing it, but he's been out of news for 3 years. After he left the New York Times, he's been away doing other things. And in fact, as I understand it from some of the reporting, he was in France touring wine country with his wife when he got a phone call in June. Now, in June, that means very soon after Chris Licht left the building. David Zaslav was reaching out to Thompson to say, would you consider this? And he didn't say yes on the phone, but it led to a series of conversations. And I would imagine that that is probably a theme that was discussed in all of those meetings. Do you have a vision? Do you have an idea of how you would address this to make CNN work? Not just that the journalists will do good journalism, they're already doing that, but how do you address these existential threats to the brand and make CNN not only relevant, but financially successful?
I do want to talk about that future. What does the future of CNN look like? What should we watch out for? We do know that CNN Max will be launching later this month, which is streaming. Will it suffer that same fate that CNN Plus did?
It's hard to think that anything could go as badly as CNN Plus did. I mean, for a lot of reasons, that was just seen as a humiliating failure. Not just a business failure, but an everything failure. So it's hard to think that, CNN on Max could do that badly. A few things different from just what we've heard about this. There will be simulcasting, which isn't necessarily what other news networks have done. NBC, has all kinds of original programming on their streaming platforms. But we understand that Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, and Wolf Blitzer's shows, and those are three of the most recognizable names on the network, in a network that, many people, if you said, who's on in primetime on CNN, they'd say, Anderson Cooper, and I'm not sure. Those three names would be part of this and would be simulcast. So people who have Max could watch those shows. That's a very different philosophy and business model from CNN Plus, which said, we'll have the people but Anderson Cooper will be doing a book show. Jake Tapper is going to be talking about cooking. All these very strange things that may have been like, wait, I don't understand what this is supposed to be. Saying we're going to have news shows on there that you can watch, and it's going to be the news that you are familiar with. That seems to be a more clear message to consumers of how the CNN brand may begin its evolution into something that isn't cable news.
Is there anything you're specifically keeping your eye out when we're following this news, looking out for CNN within the next maybe couple of months?
I think the first thing that probably CNN employees will be watching for is just how much does Mark Thompson get involved in the editorial aspects of the network. They're going to assume that he's going to dive right into the business side. He's going to be working that hard. But how involved will he be in what's on the air? Chris Licht clearly got involved in what's on the air. He revamped the morning show. That didn't work. He, and then we've seen in recent months a new primetime lineup so far hasn't really engaged very successfully with viewers. Will he get into that? Will he say, here's what we're going to do in primetime, we're going to switch things up? Will he address things like Chris Licht had Donald Trump on for a primetime town hall session that many CNN journalists cringed their way through, saying that it was, embarrassing, a disaster, platforming a guy who's doing nothing but lying. Will he get involved in issues like that? As the network goes into what could be an opportunity, CNN always does well when there's big news. We're going into an election cycle. That's where you would expect CNN to be at its best. How will CNN handle the Donald Trump factor? Will he be big, like Jeff Zucker played him big, or not? So that's what I'll be looking for to see. Is there any change in the way CNN covers the news? Any change in who covers the news? And any change in the programming? Or will he keep it like it is and take his time?
Mark Joyella, per usual, I appreciate your insights. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brittany. Always a pleasure to talk to you.